Hi, I'm Rhonda, the Education Manager here at Sawgrass, and welcome to Learn with Sawgrass, the Tuesday edition. We are with you every Tuesday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern and then Wednesday mornings at 10 o'clock Eastern right here on YouTube. So if you cannot join us live, go back to that live section and watch us later because we do try to give you a lot of tips and tricks to help you be successful with your Sawgrass system. And I am joined by Rhodes. He is operating my cameras and sound for me today, and he is also in the chat. So if you have any questions, if you want to make any comments, just feel free to leave them there and he will be glad to answer them. So I try to keep a theme every single week, and this week is all about designing. Today we're going to talk about designing for the product you're pressing onto. So my table's a little bit of a mess today. And then tomorrow we're going to talk about creating collections. So cohesive pieces that go together. I'm a huge fan of Project Runway. I've watched enough seasons to know that that whole cohesion and collection thing throws people off. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow. And later this week, check out our new podcast, Ink Differently. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Music, or Amazon Music, and we are going to we sat down with Lindsay Sport, who is our creative marketing director here at Sawgrass and has been very involved for years with our collections within our design tool. And so she is a designer at heart. She gives some amazing tips. It's going to be a phenomenal episode that drops Friday, so make sure and check that out. But right now, let's start talking about designing for the product you are pressing onto. So I think the big thing, whether you are purchasing a design, you are making a design yourself, you're using our design tool to create a design, no matter what method you're using, you really have to stop and look at the product first. So when we talk about designing for a product, the things that you have to keep in mind about the design are going to be the size of the design. So how big should the design be for what you're pressing onto? The next thing you're going to keep in mind is whether this is, that's going to tell you designing, the size of the design is going to tell you whether it's full bleed or not. So whether it's going to cover the entire product or not cover the entire product. The next thing we're going to think about is, does it need a background? So whether that's a solid color or a pattern, that's conversation too, whether it should be a solid color or a pattern. And then the next thing that you really need to think about is what colors you're going to use. You're going to think about what font style and font size you're going to use. And then the last one I'm going to call details. So with the design style, is it fine details? Is it not fine details? So we're going to look at this a couple of different ways today. So first of all, like I said, I have a wide variety of products on my desk. We're going to kind of run through those, and then we're going to go into the design tool and talk some more specifics. But let's start with some products and some product types and kind of go from there. So it's going to be a little random, so I apologize, but I think it's going to be really good. So let's start with my favorite thing, because I've realized watching back my videos, I like to juggle drinkware. So this is two wonderful things in one. First of all, this is going to be textured. Second of all, this is going to be a color. And so you're dealing with both the shimmer as far as how the shimmer looks and the shimmer as far as how the shimmer feels. And then we're going to be talking about dealing with a color background. So there's a lot we can deal with this one little bottle. So the first thing to establish is this is what we're going to call traditional sublimation. I do have a few things that are specific to VersaFlex, but they're still going to be good points. But this is going to be a true sublimation blank. You can purchase this from a wide variety of dealers. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the color. So anytime you're dealing with a color background, You have to remember that what you're designing doesn't have white in it. So a lot of times when you see things that are on a color, there's white behind them. So the color of the product isn't going to impact the colors that you're pressing onto it. It's not the case with us. You are going to see the color through because we don't have that white behind it. So you have to design for this color in mind. So first of all, you're using colors that aren't going to clash. You probably are also going to limit the number of colors that you're going to use. So you're not going to want to use a design that has like 3 or 4 colors or what I would call a full color, I'll pick it up in a minute, but my Christmas tree over here, you're not going to want to use something like that. You probably are going to stick with 2 or 3 very solid colors that kind of complement this, what do we call this? Seafoam?
Seafoam glitter.
Seafoam glitter, that complement the seafoam glitter. The other thing is, and this is what I call details, because there is a texture, you probably don't want a lot of fine details on this. This is probably where it's going to be a bolder design, more of a silhouette style. If you're using text, we're probably going to use a little bit of a bigger font because we don't want any of those details to kind of get lost in the glitter. So those are kind of the things that you would keep in mind with this. Now, I did mention full bleed. Of course, that is not possible with this. The biggest issue being the curve. You would have to go into a convection oven with some shrink wrap to get above this because I think I said it last week, you want consistent and even pressure. So really your design area on this particular bottle is this section in between my fingers. And so that's about roughly 4 inches. And then I'm going to guess a good 8 to 9 inches around. That's kind of the next thing. And so I didn't put a mug on my desk, so I'm going to grab a mug real fast. With something in it. All right. So a lot of times when we create drinkware, especially mugs, typically drinkware in general has 4 sides. 1, 2, 3, 4. So front, back, left, right. When we talk about mugs, we have 3 sides. Left side, right side, middle is what I typically call it. So a lot of times a traditional mug design is going to be something on this side and something on this side. So you have to decide when you're designing, am I putting the same design on both sides? Am I putting more of a logo on one side and then a name or something personal on the other? But generally, typically with mugs, we're looking at a front and a back. Sometimes you'll use this area, but more traditionally you're using the 2 sides. So that's kind of your first thing that you think about when you're designing a mug is, is this top to bottom? Is this completely filling the area? Is this a design on one side and a design on the other? So when we design for mugs, that's kind of what we keep in mind. This drinkware is going to be what we consider full bleed drinkware. It wraps completely around top to bottom. And then you notice on this particular one, when we talk about the real focal point, it's actually only on one side. The rest is just kind of a design to go with that. So there's a lot to kind of think about with drinkware. Again, this is full bleed. This would be really hard to do full bleed between the line down here and then this tapered area up here. So you're really designing more mug style. But again, is this something that wraps fully around it? Is this something that's on one side, or is there something on one side and something on the other side? Kind of how do you best utilize that space is often what we think about when we think about drinkware. All right. Now, when we talk about designs outside of drinkware, this is what we would consider to be full bleed. We have 100% filled this area. For this particular product, if you've never seen it, this would be white. And so this is a clear area, and if we were to press onto this, we're filling that whole area. If we do not, that white's going to look a little awkward around the edges. So this is one where there's really no option to me when I'm doing white magnets, keychains, boards like this. I'm always going to want to completely put a background on there that fills this area. Now this, the Make Your Own Magic, this is actually what we call the absence of color. So as we said, there's no white. We're actually seeing the background. So if I were to put this design on this mug, anything that is white here would be my seafoam if I were to put the same design on here. So that's another kind of design trick, is if you were pressing onto something that is colorful or colored or textured or whatever, you're seeing that through the design in any area that is a pure white. So that FF is the hex code, is going to be white, but when you press onto this, you're going to see this. So I always use the example of the jack-o'-lantern. If I were to put a giant orange pumpkin here and it left white where his teeth would actually be the seafoam color. I hope that makes sense. Rhodes, let me know if anyone has questions about that.
All right.
All right, let's talk about some of these other products. So let's talk about the puzzle. Use this example. Actually, I'm going to put my bottle away. All right, so let's talk about the puzzle. This is one where I think the big thing, first of all, you are probably going to want to do this full bleed. So you are going to want to do something that has a background, whether that's a solid color or whether that's a pattern. I would say with this, just for ease, because it is a puzzle, you don't want to make it too hard to solve. So you probably are just going to go with a solid color background and then a design on top of that. But you have to be very careful with a puzzle because it comes into pieces. So if you had really fine text, like the general rule, just as a rule, is your font size should never slip below about a 10. 10 is going to be pretty readable at a normal reading distance. I'm a little older, so I prefer 12 or 14. But a 10 is even going to be a little small on this. I probably would go with something bigger, so even if the text got divided amongst the different puzzle pieces, you're not really going to struggle. Someone would be able to figure out what letter that is and be able to do it. So on this, your big things are, you do need a background. You probably want a solid color background, and then you want to make sure that you don't have any fine details that are going to get lost when you break this into pieces. I think the last puzzle I did, and I can't remember what it was, kind of ran into that issue of I put some text on there and it was a little hard to read. So something to keep in mind when doing a puzzle. All right, we're working our way through. This is a really nifty little product. This is a frosted glass jar. I'll actually go ahead and take the label off so you can see a little better. No, I won't. I'll leave it on there for the next person because it has the pressing instructions. But the big thing with frosted glass is, so I'm going to pull back a little bit of a curtain. So a lot of times if someone were to put this up for sale on Etsy, they are going to not put this on a table, you know, print it, press it, put a design on it, put it on a cabinet, take a really nice photograph of it. Generally what they're going to do is they're going to use an online tool and the design, just magic of the computer, gets put on there. The problem with that is that the design is nice and bright, and of course everything on frosted glass is going to be slightly muted. So even with a really great profile, you're not going to get the same bright colors that we see on this with the white background, just because it's taking this into effect. So even if I were to really take a picture, I still would do some photography magic. I'd probably put like a dark colored liquid inside, and I probably wouldn't even use a soda. I would probably use some colored water. So even that would make the design look a little brighter. So it's a buyer beware if you're purchasing this, but for you as the maker, keep that in mind with your design. So you probably want to use colors that are gonna look good even if they're a little bit more muted. If you go with a very, very pale color, it's gonna get lost in the shuffle. So you wanna go pretty bright on this. And then this is, again, drinkware. Are we designing on this side and this side? Are we going all the way around knowing that this area is not going to get any heat? So how are you gonna compensate for that? How do you want that design to look? Again, about that area, 4.5, 5 inches is how tall that's gonna go. So just kind of thinking about all those fun things, but that's definitely not a lot of colors, very bright colors. And again, I would probably stay away from like really fine text, where it would look great on something like that. Here you may lose it a little bit. So you want to stay more in that 18 or bigger font size for something like this. Rhodes, any questions?
No questions so far.
Awesome. All right, where are we going to go next? Okay, so this one's already done. I did this a few weeks ago, but I want to use this as an example. So clearly, large blanket, not going to do full bleed. So full bleeds out. I probably, unless I'm doing something where it's like a circle filled with a pattern, and I'll actually show you an example of that in a minute, I'm probably not going to do a background on something like this. I'm just going to do a design. And then again, we have to be very, very careful because even this, it's really hard to read the name because and this is actually, everything so far has been true sublimation. This is VersaFlex. Because of the fibers of the blanket and because they do stand up, you have to be careful that nothing gets lost in the fluff. So you want to make sure it's not going to get lost in the fluff. I think her name gets lost in the fluff. I think if I had done this in a dark color instead of leaving it the color of the blanket and doing the white, it would have been better. So really think about that. Like when I'm putting a name on it, how well is the name going to stand up? And especially in this one, you got to fight the fluff a little bit. So really great design. Again, I probably should have done this in a dark green or even the navy blue of the wheels. Probably would have made the name a little bit more readable. So you do have to kind of keep that in mind as you're going. All right. Okay. Wood, again, a VersaFlex standard. A couple of things here. So first of all, this is a slightly darker piece of wood, so I am going to want to go with a little bit darker colors as far as putting it on here. Second, you want to play into what you're doing. So I typically, if it's the wood with the bark on it, I don't do a full background. I typically do something in the middle and then let it breathe. So let the wood stand out on its own. So that's kind of how I kind of compensate. But again, remember there's texture here. Any like truly fine details, any fine text may get lost. So you got to be kind of weary or careful of that when you design for the wood. But I also would probably go with something that's very rustic. We did some of our watercolor Christmas designs on these, and I love that look because it's just that kind of old-fashioned, homey, country look that looks great on this. All right, let's talk about sequins. I've got multiple sequins up here, I've got this lovely, it's burlap on one side, sequin on the other. Just in case you've never pressed on the sequins, sequins are a standard of sublimation. They've been around for several years now. I'm going to flip this to the white. You're going to sublimate onto the white side of the metal. I typically do it as metal, so usually 60 seconds, 400 degrees. Make sure they're all flipped over before you do it. And then once you've pressed onto it, you do want to flip it pretty quickly. So this, again, something that you need to be careful with, fine details, because they get lost in the flippy sequins. So I typically, this is the one case with a white background where I traditionally do not do full bleed, just because it's a little more difficult. I would do a nice little design in the middle, maybe a nice little circle design in the middle. And so something that, if this happened and there were sequins that didn't fully flip, that's not going to really hurt it. So bold colors, 1 or 2 colors, big words, if you're, well, not long words, but like big font size words, is going to work best on this. So this is a Christmas stocking. This is a sequined bag. You can see many colors out there for this. Again, I would probably do like a big, bold design on this. I would go as large as I could with my print area to do something for this and just kind of fill that up. But this would be a great product. This is also a sequin bag. So when we talk about tote bags, So when we talk about tote bags, and when we talk about pillows, which we're about to look at, this is where we're truly talking about that how big is the design and does it fill the area. It's really going to depend on the size of your printer. So this is probably right at the 13 of the bypass tray on the SG-1000. So you could conceivably go with a big design on this, but I probably wouldn't. I'm probably going to fill this middle area and leave it at that. But this is one where you really can vary this depending on the size of your printer. While a 13 by 19 looks great on this, if you have an 8.5 by 11, you're just again going to put that in the middle. Now again, I would do a bigger design. I wouldn't do something small, like with small details that's going to bring more to point that it's small or make it look smaller. So I'd probably compensate by something big that looks really big and bold on this. All right, so that brings us to pillowcases. Same thing, when we design for a pillowcase, you want something that's going to fill as much of the paper you have as possible on your printer, but you do not need to fill the entire pillow. If I were doing a linen pillow, I would maybe push it a little bit more as far as the design size than I would on this vegan leather. But again, these are both traditional sublimation. This one in particular, you're going to take into thought both the color, because this is a darker color, so again you have to make sure it's a color that looks good, complementary on this. The other thing, of course, that you're looking at is you want something that the style kind of matches this. Again, I'm probably going, I would say kind of masculine in my design, maybe kind of woodsy in my design. I did one a few years ago, and I can't remember if I did it on this or I did it on this. I think it was this, where it was kind of like an antlers in a fall flower thing, and it looked great with this kind of leather design. So that's one of those things that you want to keep in mind. Font size isn't really going to matter on this. Colors will matter quite a bit when you go on to something like this. Same thing with any of these. So this is a linen that is made for sublimation. We do have lots of linens out there as well. This is linen-like because linen is cotton. But whether you're doing Versaflex with something like this or whether you have a sublimation version like this one, you notice that the fabric, let me take this out of the plastic. All right, so enough that you can see this. This weave is not extremely tight. So again, if I were doing little fonts or little patterns, they could get lost in here. So you probably are going to want to kind of compensate for this with, again, kind of a bigger design to look really good on that. Okay. Look at me cleaning off my desk. All right, this is shimmer, and we've got two shimmers. We've got kind of like a glittery shimmer and then a shimmery shimmer. And again, same things that we've been talking about. I'm not going to do a lot of colors on the glitter. I'm not going to do a lot of colors on the shimmer because we don't want to take away from it. We also probably aren't going to do a massive design on this because we want that pattern to kind of stand out. This is a good one where you could do multiple little designs that would work really well. And see, Rhodes, I was right. I did need my table skirt. So this is a good example of that kind of work. This is 3 completely separate designs. I printed each one separately. I pressed each one separately. Whether you're doing Versaflex like this or whether you're doing traditional sublimation like this, this is going to work. Just make sure that when you take something that's already pressed, and if it ends up back under the press surface, you're covering it with some paper. So if any ink were to gas off or were to transfer off, you're not getting it on the press. But this is the kind of thing that I would do with this. Now, it's not Christmas to me, but I will talk about that tomorrow. But if I were to do some like Candy Lane, Candyland kind of themery around this for Christmas and do some like bright pink and white, or pink and white would work good on this, pink and white candy canes or peppermints or any of that stuff. I could do them all over it, maybe put like merry and bright and fun little words on it, but that would be really cute. All right. Okay, and then same things here. Again, I'm probably going to go with solid colors. I'm probably going to go with darker colors. This is one where I would probably go in the navy family. I think would, ooh, or purple. Dark purple, a dark navy would look really good on this. So yeah, again, know what you're pressing onto to know how to design it. And then socks. So again, socks stretch. So you want to make sure that whatever you're designing isn't going to get lost. So if I were to put a face on here, whether it's, you know, a tattoo style or whether it's a person and it stretches, it's going to stretch the details. So you want to be a little careful with what you put on a sock. Again, this is a great place to use something where you're probably putting multiple little things on it. But again, be careful because it is going to stretch on that sock. But bright colors would be wonderful here. All right. And then this is my little, I think that's chapstick holder. My little neoprene chapstick holder. Something that I would probably go full bleed on. I would want to cover the whole area, I think. I would love this with a pattern. This is the kind of thing that I generally put a pattern on and then maybe put a letter right in the middle, and it looks really, really great. So that's all my products. Let's go into the design tool and look at a few things. All right, Rhodes, any questions?
No questions right now.
All right.
Miriam did say that it's still very warm in the Netherlands, so she's struggling to think about Christmas.
Well, see, so we live in South Carolina, so Christmas is not cold here. So we are warm year-round, We did this past year get snow. We get snow every 7 years, and we did get snow this year. But in general, we don't get a lot of snow. We don't get a lot of cold. So for us, you can think about Christmas in July because it's only slightly warmer by about 20 degrees than it may be at Christmas time. All right. So I'm actually, let's pull up a tote bag and put some things on it. I'm just going to use a canvas tote bag for this example. And I did, Rhodes, I'm sorry, we have one more thing to show and then we'll go back to the computer. And so I'm going to talk about my shirt. So this is a cotton shirt. I did use Versaflex on it. And this design looks pretty good even on the very, very bright yellow. Now, if I were doing Versaflex and I were going onto a brighter color, so kind of my fire engine reds, my yellows, my oranges, I'm probably not going to do a design that has this much color in it. I would prefer to have 2 or 3 colors that really complement and pop on this. Yellow, I may use a red. I could definitely use a black. I may be even able to get away with a green, but I probably wouldn't go as heavy into the design as I did here. But I've gotten so many compliments on my shirt today because it's nice and bright, and it's been raining here, so we love the bright. But this is a good one to show you the Versaflex in the middle. Again, it would have been white on my design, so when we press it, you see the shirt color in there. So I will often, and I did this a lot with Chromoblast, I would do reverse design. So that pumpkin, where I would do a solid color pumpkin and then have the jack-o'-lantern face or even an initial in white so that it was the color of the shirt and it really popped through the design. So I design that way a whole lot. So that's really a fun one. The other thing I want to talk about with shirts is if you are using Sublijet or Easy Subli ink and you are going onto a shirt that is not 100% polyester, you probably are not going to get full coverage. So after a wash or two, anywhere that isn't polyester, any fibers that aren't polyester, the ink's just going to wash off. So if I were to do a shirt that was 60% polyester and 40% cotton, then that 40% is going to wash away. And so you get kind of this vintagey look. So you really want to design into that. And so that's exactly where we're going to start today. So I'm going to go into designs. I was kind of playing around yesterday, and one category that really helped me with this is the Father's Day category. All right, so let's talk about this design. This is what I call the vintage look. This particular style of design is very, very popular right now, where it has these colors in the background. Trying to zoom in so you can see this. So when I say vintagey, as you can see, there are areas of the color that have been removed. So it's done in such a way that it already looks like you've worn it 20 times and took it out to the farm and all of those things. So you're seeing those lines in it, and it really, really helps. Now again, this is a design that if I were to do it on gray, or if I were to do this on kind of like a minty green, you would see that color through. Now, if I were doing this on a minty green, I need to keep in mind that there is a green. So how does the greens look together? Are they going to fade into one another? Are they going to be as vibrant as I'd want them to be? So this is one of those things that you really want to keep in mind when you're designing, especially if you're going on to something where you want that kind of vintagey look, you want to be very careful with that. Okay. So let's talk about designs that already have a background on them. Okay. So I love this design. If I were putting this particular design on a, oh, it's going to bother me that the text is too low. 1 second. If I were putting this particular design onto like a cosmetic bag, I would do it full bleed. So cosmetic bag, I would do full bleed. Keep that kind of peachy background back there when I did that one. But if I were doing the same design here on this tote bag, I am probably going to delete my background. You're going to see where I'm doing this right here at the top. And now that's gone and it's just this design. Now, again, this is one of those things that you have to think about. There's text at the bottom. How is that color going to look? How is that going to read? I would probably, in this case, not change the text. I accidentally grabbed something else. I would probably just make it a little bit bigger. So I may even make the boot smaller and the text fill across as big as my paper will go, just to make that a little easier to read. But you could easily as well, this bright pink, I'm going to click on it. I can get the hex code down here. I'm just going to highlight it, Apple C or Control C on Windows. I'm going to Control C it, and then I can actually click back on the text. Click back on the text. And then change that color and make it that bright pink. And maybe that would work a little bit better. So I'm going to do a paste. And look, there's that darker pink, which I think would really work. Oh, I didn't hit done. Ha, 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 ha. So if you didn't see what I did, I changed the color. Got really proud of myself and never hit the done button, so it changed back. So I would kind of probably play with that in this case. Just to make it a little bit stronger design and a little bit easier to read. Okay. All right, let me switch products for this next one. Oh. Okay, I'm going to go with something like a magnet or a keychain for this one, just to kind of show you what I would do. So I was saying this earlier, this is one where I would probably go into backgrounds and I would use a pattern. So we have, if you haven't seen them, we have some amazing patterns in here. One of the things about our patterns is a lot of them are that upgraded feature. So you would have to have that My Sawgrass Plus subscription, but you can easily get that and use those. I'm going to go with these. Let's go with these pairs. Okay, so with something like this, you control the size of it. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to make my parrots a little bit bigger. I can make them smaller too, just depending on what I wanted to do. This would be one where I would probably come in and just type a letter. Go to my font style. Pick one that's very decorative. Again, the filters come in really handy here to help you pick that. And find a font that works. I'm going to change this to white. Make sure to hit done. And then now I could have my initial or my name right there on that really cool pattern background. And I really love to fill smaller things like that chapstick holder with that, to use a pattern to do that. All right. Okay, so I feel like for this I want something that's nice and flat. So one of the things I mentioned earlier is you can do a pattern, but you want to do a pattern in a controlled space. So if I were doing a pattern on a pillowcase or a pillow, if I were doing a pattern on a tote bag, I'm probably going to want to do something where I have an item, where I have a specific shape that it fills. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. I'm actually going to... I just need something big, so we'll go with this, which I think is a laptop case. Now, let's imagine on this laptop case, I usually with a laptop case would fill the area with color, so we'll actually do that. Oh. It decided to give me both, so I apologize. I'm going to go all the way out for now. Okay. I'm going to go back to my canvas tote bag. All right. So one of the things that I really love is if you go into elements, we have shapes. So I can go in and in this case, I may just do something. Actually, let's do the water drop for this particular one, the teardrop. I can go into this and then I'm going to use this as a mask. I'm going to click here on my images. Give me just a minute to get into my images. They get a little further down every day. All right. So as you can see, I have put a pattern in here. And then now I could go in and do what I did before. And I could actually put a letter or a phrase or whatever on this. As we talked about some of those smaller designs, I could do multiple raindrops on my bag and then put a different pattern in each. So there's a lot of great things you could do with that as well to kind of fill your area. All right. Rhodes, do we have any questions?
No questions.
All right. Well, I hope this has been helpful. I hope you've gotten some ideas or some things to think about. And this covers the gamut. So whether you're designing yourself, whether you are purchasing designs online, or whether you're using our design tool, all of these are things that you have to keep in mind when you pick your product and then when you pick the design to go with it. I hope you can join us tomorrow morning or join us a little bit later on in the recording. We will be talking about building cohesive collections, pieces that work together. But I hope you learned a lot about designing for your product today. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.